Joe, and we are live. Welcome back. Why did I say Joe to start off? And we are.
I don't know. I was excited when you said my name first. Sorry, I cut you off.
Also, what she said. Nevertheless, we are live. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
What a way to start the show. I'm doing good, Blake. Not a lot of American Conference coaches are doing great, though. There were a lot of firings today. I don't know if this is a precursor for what's going to be a very bloody Monday next week and the following week. But, God, there were a lot of coaches that were relieved of their duties, a number of which were pretty early, like Tom Herman and Biff Poggi.
Well, in Tom Herman's case, it was reported by Matt Zenitz of 247 that he was actively trying to get P4 offensive coordinator roles.
Yeah.
That he deserves to be fired for being a scumbag and doing that in and of himself. I mean, how you tell your team to fight when you're trying to get out of there, I think that's
right
in and of itself. You know, I don't like Tom Herman as a person. I think he's a horrible human being, and he kind of got what he deserved. Biff, on the other hand, it's
Biff stinks.
for the sleeveless America club, right?
Yeah.
The people who don't like sleeves are having a bad day. But Joe, that's not the biggest news here. Last night, you and I got in a very spirited debate about the SEC and pretty much the Big Ten, which now I have seen has trickled to other shows and platforms, and I'm glad that it started off here, our argument last night between the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yes, and it's going to be one that is going to continue for the next couple of weeks. I'm sure that tomorrow when we do our rankings reaction, that's going to be a majority of the debate that we're going to have. Like that is going to be the most of what we're going to continue to talk about here. I don't think anybody and anyone who wants to act like the SEC schedule isn't the hardest. I think that isn't what the main talking point should be. The main talking point has to be, how do you value a Big Ten schedule, an ACC schedule, whatever it might be, compared to the SEC, because there is no real correlation between the two, because of that obvious reason that the SEC is playing a clearly harder schedule.
Well, and that Indiana is finally playing the first team on their schedule this year with a winning record.
Yes, that is true.
Right? I mean, true. And so now you get to a place, Joe, if Ohio State beats Indiana, I don't want to say handily, but if they do they deserve to be left out?
I don't know if I'm ready to answer that question, if I'm being completely honest. I think that they probably, yes.
See them go up against Ohio State before you.
No, because, well, actually, I think that's true. I don't like dealing in hypotheticals that extreme because there's a lot of things that can happen.
The line's at 12. This is the biggest spread in the last 10 years where a team 1 versus 5 faces off, and it's a 12-point spread. I mean,
well, it's not 1 versus 5, isn't it? 2 versus 5?
A top 5 spreads, what I said.
Okay,
two teams, okay. Whatever. Regardless, 2 teams in the top 5 is a 12-point spread. I mean, what are we doing here? And then secondly, Joe, I got to be real. We talked about South Carolina, which pretty much started the debate between the Big Ten and the SEC. Let's take South Carolina out of it for a moment, because every time we do that, you and I start yelling. But again, to their point, or to any SEC team's point that has 2 losses, how do you look at Indiana, the Big 12, and the group of 5 opponent? Like that, that's the part where I think that I get more frustrated than anything, is that I can't look at Indiana. Quite honestly, I'm going to be real with you. I can't look at Notre Dame, okay, and say that it's created equally.
Okay, right? Well, wait. I think that Notre Dame is in a different conversation. They're out because it's extremely rare what they're dealing with here.
So they face 2 teams with a winning record.
Okay, it's just, let me finish what I was trying to say here. It's very rare what they're dealing with, having the NIU loss. And if they hadn't lost to NIU, the conversation would be completely different, but people would still be knocking their schedule. They're not the same as BYU. They are not the same as Indiana. They're not the same as Boise State, because every single game throughout the stretch of their schedule, they have blown out every single opponent.
That's what makes it out every single opponent.
Yes, they have.
They didn't blow out A&M, which would be their biggest win.
Except for outside of A&M. Since that game, they have blown out every single opponent, though.
I just, you know who did blow out A&M?
Yeah, I guess South Carolina did.
Okay. All right, so we got 4 games we're going to talk about here tonight. Ohio State and Indiana, speaking of the devil, Notre Dame and Army. Joe, those 2 games are going to be the premier games of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird week of games. Again, we've had a weird stretch of games in this month of November where not a lot of competitive matchups. That Notre Dame Army game, though, it's going to be used as – it shouldn't be, but it's going to be used as evidence for another ranked win for Notre Dame. But we all know that that is not the same thing as beating a Big Ten, an SEC team, or a Big 12 team.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think BYU versus Arizona State has more severity to it, right? Because the winner of that game is likely going to be going to the Big 12 title game. And we'll talk about BYU, Arizona State tonight. But, I mean, listen, man, like, again, Army's ranked, and that I love it for Army, but at the same time, like this is the part where I'm talking about with Notre Dame, because we'll talk about it. What's the realistic nature of the team that you're actually playing here? So we will get to BYU and Arizona State and Alabama and Oklahoma. Joe, a lot of people are kind of fading on Bama this week. I don't know why. Do they know something that we don't?
Who's
a lot of public money came in on Oklahoma because of the spread being as big as it was.
I wouldn't take that bet. That's a weird trend.
What do they know that we don't? Now, watch I say that, and then tomorrow morning it's going to be the complete and total opposite.
Right.
But nevertheless, as of 3 o'clock today, a lot of public money came in on Oklahoma. So we'll break that game down here tonight as well. So let's get rolling. Joe, let's get rolling here. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. Share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook, share to all those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, because on Tuesdays, Joe and I do a reaction to the playoff ranking. We also do other games. We'll talk about games like Ole Miss and Florida tomorrow. So you got to be subscribed to get that content. It's free. Got subscribing to YouTube. It's free. So all you got to do is click the button. That's all that we ask. It helps us. That's the only thing we ask during the show from you. Only complete thing that we ask. Joe, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we break down Indiana and Ohio State next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right. Let's get rolling here. Joe, the first game that we got to talk about is a massive game in the Big Ten here. Ohio State already clearly has the loss to Oregon, but Indiana is undefeated and finally facing Joe, I'm just going to call it what it is, a comparable and capable opponent here in Ohio State. I kick it over to you, man. How do you see this game playing out?
First of all, you mentioned the line for this game is pretty wide. 12 points is where the spread is currently sitting. I don't think that this game is going to be a blowout. I don't think that this game is going to be widely in favor of Ohio State. But to be very clear and to get ahead of as we start to unpack this game, Blake, it shouldn't be a hot take to say that Ohio State's going to win this football game. They are the more talented team on paper. They are the more talented team on film. They've got more draft prospects. They are built to come into this game and win it confidently. Does not mean that they're going to beat them by 20 points. Does it mean they beat them by 7 to 10? Absolutely. What we know that this Ohio State team has done in all of their successes since that Oregon loss is they've run the ball really freaking well. They've thrown the ball all over the field and at a consistent clip. Will Howard is at that 73% completion percentage on the year with 24 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. And they're playing phenomenal defense like we knew that they were going to do, with great play at every single position group, with, again, future NFL players all over this roster. I give Indiana a shot to keep this thing close because their offensive line has been one of the best in the country, and they have played together very consistently. Their run game has been very steady, and Curtis Rourke has been a great decision maker, even in some of his weaker performances. So that's what I said on this, Blake. I'm curious to see where you're going to take this, but I don't think that this game is going to be truly lopsided like many people want it to be.
I can't. I barely could get through that, you saying that, because
let me
say this. Here is where I am. I saw you face a very physical football team in Michigan. Michigan is flawed and a lot of different positions and all over the place. And, Joe, you couldn't establish a running game. You were mistiming on throws. Physically, I thought, even in a loss, from top to bottom, Michigan was more physical than Indiana was. Now, the thing that's interesting there is that, well, Blake, Oregon's coming off a 3-point win against Wisconsin. How do you judge them versus us in Indiana? But, Joe, I've seen Oregon already get tested, right? Like, meaning I've seen Oregon go up against Ohio State and win. I look at Indiana and say, Joe, I don't know if it's fair for me to look at a team like Ohio State and Indiana and say to myself, hey, the team that gave you the most problems was the team that had the best blue chip ratio. And what I mean by that is not actually the blue chip ratio, but just in meaning that had the best talent on the field. They don't have it. They don't have a solution at quarterback. They're having to put in a walk-on at quarterback. We all know the issues for them offensively. But, Joe, when I go back and watch the Michigan game today, and I'm like, man, you just can't get away with this stuff against Ohio State, and they're not going to be able to. Joe, the big thing for me is you talked about their offensive line being good. Yeah, but being good against whomst is the problem that I'm having here. And the problem that I have here is I think that more than anything, they're going to have massive issues on the lines of scrimmage. This is how I feel about Indiana at the current moment. I feel like because they are coming out of nowhere, so to speak, because Indiana is not one of these teams that we constantly see with 9, 10, 11 wins every year. We do this with everybody. We want them to be good. But then when reality sets in and they got to face teams that have a really good line of scrimmage, what do? What happens? They get abused. You're not going to convince me right now on a Monday that Ohio State is not going to be able to implore some of the same physicality that Michigan did against Indiana. It's not a logical thought.
Okay, wait, stop. I didn't say that. And I didn't say that they were going to step up and match their physicality. That's not what's being said here.
But they would have to some extent if you're calling it a 7 to 10 point game. See, in reality of what I heard you say is if you say 7 to 10 points, okay, the way that I perceive that is the simple nature that, hey, does Ohio State got the ball last and they go down and score? Because that's a 7-point game. So when you say it like that, they would have to meet that physicality. So if I'm misunderstanding what you're saying here and you're saying it's only a 7-point game, I don't see that.
I think you're reading into what I'm saying a little bit too deeply, and you're making an assumption off of what I'm saying.
Say that it was going to be a 7 to 10 point game.
But you're making an assumption off of what. Okay. Ohio State also has a game on their schedule where they got out physicaled by a team right now that's struggling, and that's Nebraska. They could not run the football, and I know that was at the very beginning of their offensive line issues. I don't think that that's indicative of how Ohio State plays in this game. I'm bringing that up to say that no team is perfect in their performances on a week-to-week basis. Indiana played their worst game against Michigan, against a team that does have two dominant and elite defensive tackles in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant that are going to go on to be top 50 NFL draft picks. I'm saying this to say that Michigan, yes, their quarterback situation is a shit show. Their offense is a mess. that does not mean that Indiana comes out and wins this game because they played Michigan close. I'm only just trying to point out that that was a tough battle, and that as bad as this Michigan team is, it's still a test so far this season. I feel like we're just quick to assume that just because Michigan's bad, that's not a difficult matchup for Indiana. Teams all throughout the year have been slipping up against lesser opponents and still finding ways to win. But because it's Indiana, we don't want to give them credit for it.
In those instances, those other teams also have situations where they went up against opponents that are either ranked or more high-level opponents than what Indiana did. Indiana is the only team in the top 10 that hasn't faced a team with a winning record yet. Like, you talk about Ohio State, I'm like, well, they lost by 1 against Oregon on the road. Like, I mean, that's as splitting hairs as you can get. That's literally me coming in here and saying the team that has home field advantage is going to win. And quite honestly, it's pretty much what it came down to in the end here. When I look, Joe, when I look at Indiana, I think that they are much better, clearly, in every single facet since Curt Cignetti got there. But I can't get out of my head that when I see that Michigan game, I'm like, where's the other opponents that can match this kind of physicality and toughness? That's where I'm at. Now, here's something that's interesting. You know what the other thought that I have in here, though, is Ryan Day in these top flight, high-ranked games constantly finds ways to wee-wee down his leg. And yeah, I say wee-wee for all you people who are French and love watching college football. Does that worry you any here? I mean, like, does the stigma of Ryan Day facing top 5 opponents worry you at all?
No, because, again, admittedly, this is not your typical top 5 opponent. I think Indiana being moved up to – look, and I've never said this. I've never said that Indiana should be a top 5 team. I think that we've gotten ahead of ourselves, and I think that the AP has gotten ahead of themselves. They weren't even in my top 10 in my power rankings. So I don't think this is the same as that typical matchup. I think this is slightly a manufactured ranking, where I think having this conversation about this matchup gets really frustrating is that reality has separated between our expectations for Indiana from those that don't totally know what they're watching. Like the AP voters, just the general college football fans that are really, really going out of their minds in propping up Indiana. Though, to stay back with what we're talking about here with this Indiana squad, I get what you're trying to bring up with how, yes, the first time that you played against a physical squad, that game ends up being closer and you don't have that same level.
You ran for 40 yards.
This would be a different situation if they were doing what BYU was doing every single week.
Joe, BYU is, Joe, in fairness, they're facing opponents with winning records. I mean, they faced SMU. I mean, regardless if you want to take BYU out of it or not, again, all right.
Wait. Okay.
You know what? Okay.
It's more. Oh, wait. It's more. It is more elaborate than just saying that, though. They are at the top. It's not more elaborate. Yes, it is, because they're at the tops of most offensive and defensive statistical categories. They're not just winning by large margins. They're dominating in every area of the field. I'm not trying to make the case for Indiana as the number 1 team in the country, which is what's going to get misjudged by this conversation for what people are probably going to comment on this video. But when you are this freaking dominant and you are this explosive, it at least translates to something. The same crap happened last year with Michigan until they played Penn State. The same exact thing happened.
Different beast, Joe.
I'm not comparing them to Michigan, but all I'm trying to say here, though, is that just because they're not playing anybody does not mean that we have to completely drop them down and say that they suck and they're completely overrated.
I never said that they suck. I never called them overrated. But when you
wait, hold on. The way that you're talking about them implies that you're saying that they're overrated because you're saying that they're not going to be that competitive.
I think they're overrated compared to what the AP poll has them in. Yeah, I do. So, and you just admitted to that earlier.
Yeah, they should be at 10. They should probably be at 10.
You admitted that they were overrated your damn self. So don't label me saying they're overrated when you did it too. Joe, they had 40 rushing yards. They were top 5 rushing offense before they played Michigan. And I'm supposed to come out here in good conscience and good faith and saying, hey, you haven't faced an opponent this year with a winning record. Now you want me to come out here and say that a team that's better than Michigan, that a team that, quite honestly, Joe, is really, really good at stopping you through the air, a team that is physical in their front seven, a team that's more physical than Michigan in their front seven. Oh, and by the way, I know that Ohio State has issues along their offensive line, but when they went up against Penn State, they were still able to run the football against a really decent front seven in their own right. Then I look at Indiana's run defense. Joe, they were in the rushing offense, and I look at them through the first or last couple of weeks. When they face tough opponents, they've been stuffed. And when I look at Curtis Rourke in this wide receiver room, I know that they're explosive. I know that they've been making plays. But when Ohio State makes you one-dimensional, I don't know if you have the dudes on the outside that can beat dudes that Ohio State has one-on-one. I don't. So when I look, I'm taking them to cover and I'm taking them to win, meaning Ohio State. This is going to be a different beast in one position group, and that's the line of scrimmage. The big boys are going to set the tone in this game, and I'm telling you, listen to your boy. This is going to – Joe, Ohio State's going to come out and they're going to run this football, and they're going to establish it. And I understand that Indiana is the number one rush defense in the country. I get that. Watch what's going to happen here. This is the best team top to bottom clearly. Let me be careful here. From an athlete-to-athlete standpoint that the Big Ten can give us.
Wait, say that again? Wait, say that last part again.
From athlete per athlete, I think that Ohio State is the best that the Big Ten has to offer.
Oh, yes. That's not a debate. That's not a debate.
That's why I was like, why do you want me to repeat that? But
I just didn't hear what you said.
Here's another thing. Joe, I look at Davis Warren as an example from a couple of weeks ago. Davis Warren did go 50% for 137 yards. If you go back and watch the game, and he actually wasn't technically bad in some situations. They're about to light this secondary up too. Jeremiah Smith, ding, 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 ding.
Okay,
ding,
so
ding.
This is where I get completely off track here because, again, if this was an Indiana team that had multiple slip-up opportunities, if this was like TCU a couple of years ago, like if I was trying to make the argument, but they were still scraping by in a couple of games, and they were extremely lucky in a lot of situations. They didn't do anything that was like super, super exceptional. Quentin Johnston was great. Max Duggan made a lot of good plays. And I love using BYU as an example because BYU is so middle of the pack in every single statistical category, and they don't have any premier NFL athletes that are going to be picked anywhere in the top 100 of the upcoming draft. Indiana does have quality players on this team. And again, their production that they have on both sides of the football shows up. I don't think that you mentioned that they had that outside of that Michigan game that they had games where they didn't run the ball that well. That's not true.
Yeah,
that's not true.
No, Washington. The second most physical team.
That was when Washington, when they played with a backup quarterback that knew that they were going to have to overly rely on their run game.
Okay. But that's my point, though. You ran for 188, and I get that. But that's basically your offense. You're running the ball at will over and over and over again. And, okay, you're going to run the ball 50 times. You better have more than 188 yards. I'm sorry, you better.
I just don't like this assumption that you think that this is going to be a cakewalk, that they're just going to blow past them. Could this game get lopsided? Absolutely. Am I picking Ohio State? Yes, I am picking Ohio State before anybody gets pissed at me in the comments. But my point that I'm trying to make is that Indiana has played very dominant football to this point and has put on film a capability to play this game close and competitively. But like, what did Penn State do coming into the week against Ohio State to say that they were worthy of playing Penn State playing Ohio State close? They didn't play anybody coming into that game.
You know what they did? They constantly brought in top 7 or top 10 recruiting classes. I know based off of what I saw the year before with those same athletes, okay, against these tough opponents, that they can play. So don't tell me that
there's plenty of teams that have good recruits that don't play well in college football. So I don't think that's paints the picture.
Are you legitimately asking me, like legitimately, who?
Penn State didn't play anybody until they played Ohio State.
Is Bill Carter going to go in the first round?
Yes, he's going to.
Okay, how do I know that?
Because the draft.
Thank you for making my argument.
Wait, but hold on. Michael Kamara and number of these players within their secondary. Michael Kamara is one of the top sack getters in the country right now. So again, it's not like they've just got a bunch of random dudes out there. You've got a guy who is leading the country as one of the best sack getters. Jalen Walker has 6 pass breakups on the year. They have one of the most productive secondaries in the country. Like they are a quality team that you're making it seem like they're a bottom tier team in the conference. And I think that's just crazy.
You know why? Because again, I look at the teams that they're playing in the Big Ten. I don't know how else to get this through to you.
I just think that is not fair to do because they can't control who they're playing and they're kicking the crap at everybody.
I never said when it comes down to resume and playoff, that's one thing. I don't blame them on who they're playing. I don't. But at the same time, when I have a team in Michigan that is that physical, and Joe, you're getting beat up. Let's call it what it is. They were getting beat up at the line of scrimmage. Now I got a better team that can do that better.
Again, I'm not saying that Indiana wins the football game.
Joe, they're going to win.
That's not what I'm saying.
You better get ready for it.
I will take Indiana to cover gladly. I will gladly take that money.
Okay, well, let's put a little money on it. How much money you want to put on it?
Well, we'll settle that off air.
No, I want to settle it on air. So that
how much do you want to put on it?
How about a Happy Meal?
Sure, let's do a Happy Meal.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I have 2 kids, and a Happy Meal is like $20, bud.
I'm fine putting $20 down on that.
All right. You better be glad I'm not asking you for a whole bottle of whiskey here, which I owe you a bottle of whiskey, but you're going to owe me a bottle. So it evens itself out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, another blowout that's on the way here is that Army is about to blow out Notre Dame. Just kidding. All right. Notre Dame and Army take on one another this weekend. Joe, Army undefeated coming into this one. Notre Dame coming into this one with only 1 loss. Joe, if Army wins this game, man, I mean, look, they got a lot that's on the line. Both teams legitimately do. Okay? I know a lot of people are turning their noses up at this one, but I am not. But what do you think of this game, Army and Notre Dame facing off here?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident that Notre Dame is going to win this football game. Look, I get it that Army has been – see, this is a matchup that fits the conversation that we were just having a second ago. This is a matchup that some people are going to try and make. But they're playing an AAC schedule. They're not playing a Big Ten schedule. They're playing an AAC schedule. They have quite literally
stronger strength schedule than Indiana.
But they shouldn't. They quite literally have not played anybody. When you're beating up on G5 teams, we are both smart enough to know that there is a difference. I mean, in college,
so is that you're going to defend Notre Dame's strength of schedule, okay? And you're going to put this Army game in there.
No, I'm not. Well, can I get to? That's part of my point. Let me get to my point. We both played college football. When I played against the 3 G5 teams that I played against, and then the one time we played against Virginia Tech, there is such a blatant, stark difference. So I'm saying that to say that this Army team is not the story that everybody thinks it is. It's fun. They put up a ton of yards on the ground. They're averaging 334 rush yards per game. Bryson Daly has been a monster for them, who has 21 rushing touchdowns on the season. They figured out ways to throw the ball, which is abnormal for an Army team, that they can turn to that occasionally. But Notre Dame's squad, loaded with former 5-star, 4-star recruits, is built to win this football game and to completely out-physical them. And to what you just brought up to close out my point here, I'm begging Notre Dame fans to please do not try to make this game out to be like it is some big resume piece. It is a good, nice win to put on the schedule. It's probably one of your tougher matchups that you've had in the past month, which is really freaking lame to say. Please be smart enough to read the room while everybody else is yelling about the SEC's difficult schedule and how it compares to the Big Ten, to understand that this is not the same thing. When you kick the shit out of Army, which you should, please understand the context. It's not the same. It is a G5 team practically.
All right, I'm going to push back a little bit and be serious here.
Okay.
You're right. Notre Dame is blatantly going to out-physical Army. I'm with you there. I don't want to even make that a thing of what I'm about to say. Like, I'm with you there, okay? Really interested to see, as every team goes and does and battles teams like this with Army, how disciplined are you? Like, that's what it's going to come down to. I do think Army actually, Joe, for what it's worth, they're a little bit more athletic than people are giving them credit for. You know, everybody does look at Army and like, oh, it's Army. No, they got some dudes that can run. And this little system, I mean, it's different than what they normally do with the triple option. They're going out of gun. Mm-hmm. They're more Vandy-ish. If you watch, I watched a lot of Vandy today, ironically. But you got Vandy, okay, and you got Army, and it's a lot of the same principle. A lot of the same principle. A lot of the same things that they want to do. Joe, because it's more spread out, I'm interested to see how I'm really intrigued to see how Marcus Freeman like X's and O's this thing up. Right? Like I'm really interested because it's going to tell a lot about what he thinks about his team athletically, in my humble opinion. So I'm with you. There is one thing that I want to throw out there. I have no idea what to make of Army defensively either. Joe, they're fifth in the country in total defense, but I want to be careful.
Yeah,
I really
right. Go ahead.
Okay, but it's not as if that they've allowed anybody, regardless of who they've played, to throw the ball on them. Teams have made some mistakes on them, and Joe, they've picked them off. They've batted balls down. They've been really good in coverage. Like, I do wonder what Riley Leonard looks like here against a defense statistically that has not been that bad in their back end. Joe, I'm just going to tell you, man, they got some athletes at safety now. They really, really do. Okay, and so when I look at Army, I'm like, look, I get it is who they are. It is what it is. But I'm more intrigued by how Notre Dame looks against a team like this. That, look, not the same caliber of athlete, but man, the kid can play a little bit.
Well, Notre Dame fans know that this is always, and we talked about this coming into the Navy game, this is always going to be a battle no matter what. Army always brings their A game against Notre Dame, no matter how good or bad they are. So this, for the first half of the game, could end up being close. And you're right. It's the same thing I've mentioned all year long. How does Notre Dame play to start off this game? Are they playing and firing on all cylinders because they're understanding that they're going up against a weaker opponent that they should beat? Or do they come out slow? If you come out slow against an Army team, you will lose the football game. Just plain and simple.
Well, and here's the thing. I disagree with you. It better not be close at half. Can I tell you why?
No, it shouldn't be.
Well, it can't be. Not it shouldn't be. It can't be. Here's the reason why. Joe, Army still is the number one team in time of possession. They will 3 yards in a cloud of dust to you. They will.
They've literally done that a number of games this year. Actually, every game.
I'm going to say this. Hear me out until the very end, and I'm done. This is your revenge on how disciplined you can be as a football team after NIU. Right? Like, meaning there are a lot of the same principles that NIU did that Army is going, that NIU ran, Army will perfect. Right? Meaning in the sense of they run this every day. Like, this is what they do. This is who they are. It is in their DNA to do what they do. Go get your rebound. Because I know it's not the game that everybody in the nation wants to talk to you about and say, oh, look, you beat Army. No, I want to see how disciplined you come into this one. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's not necessarily a rebound, but, hey, football guys will know this. How can you come in this game disciplined?
Right. You have to play assignment sound. For anyone who doesn't know how to defend the option or an offense like this, different guys have different assignments on every single play. Somebody is the pitch man. Right.
Oh,
If one guy makes a single mistake and he doesn't play his read, the play automatically pops for a big gain. And that's what wins Army and Navy football games. I agree with your point. It is a way to reassure us that Notre Dame has the focus and the ability to play against an opponent like this. And again, it's what we discussed coming into the Navy game. And it's why I feel good coming into this matchup, because there isn't much separation between Army and Navy. They're both good football teams. And why Notre Dame was able to completely blow them out outside of Navy imploding on themselves is that they played really good fundamental defense, and they did not play outside of the structure of what they needed to do on every single play. There was no freelancing. There wasn't guys trying to do too much. But we do need to acknowledge here, and why I have no reason to fear as a Notre Dame fan, that Army, as long as you don't come out completely slow and play close to them in half, like you just said, Army has not played anybody that has presented them with a real challenge. They have played through a schedule against G5 opponents that are of a similar level of athleticism, that when you are schemed up and you are far tougher than them, you are going to be able to win those football games. That's why they're undefeated to this point. But like, who the heck is their toughest matchup that they've played? Like they have, here's a stretch of games where they played teams where they fired their head coaches. Florida Atlantic, Rice, Temple, Tulsa still has their coach. They beat UAB. Eastern Carolina fired their coach. Air Force has been a mess this year. Their best win is against North Texas. There is, and I don't want to hear anybody, I don't know how many Army fans even exist, Blake, but there's going to be plenty of outsiders that want to do the whole, well, what if Army won this football game? They're not going to win this football game. They haven't been challenged. They're playing the bottom of the AAC this year.
yeah. And in that North Texas game, if I'm not mistaken, didn't North Texas like make some staff changes and they only scored 14 points?
They might have.
I think they
But
fired.
they did only score.
They started their DC and then he got fired and then they only scored 14 points.
Yeah.
So to your point, I'm with you. Again, it's just more about intriguement at this point with me, Joe, about how you stop it. How focused can you be? That's going to be the ultimate question here.
You know, this is in Yankee Stadium, right?
I do. Are you going to the game?
No, I'm not. Sadly, I'm not. I tried to get my dad's birthday was on Sunday. So I was trying to convince him. I'm like, let's go. I'll buy, like, me and my brother were going to buy the tickets and stuff. But like, he's like, I don't want to freeze my ass off. And I'm like, I kind of respect that because he's in his 60s now. So.
I mean, how cold is it in New York?
I think it's going to be, I want to say it's going to be in the 30s. Yeah, it's going to be in the 30s during kickoff. So
going to be in the 30s here. So
yeah, but you're sitting outside for
no difference in the South and the North. I try to tell you that all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, when y'all start getting the teens, I'm going to be shutting up about that comment. Alabama and Oklahoma, Joe, face off this weekend. Alabama coming off a win against Mercer. And Joe, we've talked about Oklahoma.
Good win.
Oh my God. Now, talking about Oklahoma this year, me and you for the fourth time, it's been a lot of depressing stuff when we talk about Oklahoma. Oklahoma's shown a little bit of fight as of a little bit late, but Alabama taking on Oklahoma, your thoughts?
I don't think either of us are going to come in here and try to make the case for Oklahoma. The plainest, simplest fact, I know that Alabama hasn't been perfect defensively, but Oklahoma's offensive line sucks. It's awful. 41 sacks allowed. Alabama is 12th in defensive EPA per dropback, meaning that they're not allowing much success on passing downs. Arnold also has not been great since he reclaimed that starting role, and he's been completing 61% of his passes for 12 touchdowns. They have found every single way to lose games that they possibly can. We know that Alabama should win this football game. Here is the main thing, Blake, that I am paying attention to. Jalen Milroe had a phenomenal performance against LSU on the ground. We saw the 4 touchdowns, the big plays that he had. I can't help but feel not confused, but disappointed that they're not finding more success with their running backs. Because I think that in the playoff, that yes, Jalen Milroe can be this mega athlete who is impossible to keep up with. But I wonder if in the playoff against better, more sound defenses, like we've even seen so far this year, like when they played against South Carolina, like when they suffered their losses so far this year, where they haven't played as strong and they've seen these tougher defensive fronts, that Milroe's been bottled up. I want to see, can they rely on Jam Miller? Can they rely on Justice Haynes? Can they get the ground game going with their running backs, which they have not been able to do so far this year against what is going to be a challenging matchup, which is one of the best run defenses in the country. They're second in defensive EPA per rush. That's the biggest thing for me, Blake.
Yeah, and 18th in total rushing yards given up. And that's saying something when you're in a situation where your offense is just that bad for Oklahoma because you're on the field so much. It shows that you actually do have depth along your defensive line, Joe, if we're being completely honest. Listen, I saw Jalen Milroe use LSU a year ago as their springboard into the playoff. I think I'm about to see it again. I think he's healthy or healthier than what he was. Tennessee game, I thought he was pretty beat up. Joey's throwing the ball a little bit more with confidence. He didn't have to do that much against LSU, but when he did, boy, he really let it go. Joe, I do think defensively, Alabama is starting to find their own way too. And I think that in a game like this, when you have a team that's really bad offensively versus a team that is kind of they're on that rise right now, okay, right. From what we've seen with Bama, how bad can this one get? Like, I do think that this is going to be the springboard for Bama, or LSU was the springboard for Bama to be able to go where they need to go. Joe, there's nothing that Oklahoma does, quite honestly, that at least offensively, they just can't score enough, man. Alabama's issues mainly have not been getting points. Their loss against Vandy, they scored 35. I know that the Tennessee game was different, but outside of that, Joe, they've been pretty consistent getting into the end zone. And when you're leaning on the Oklahoma defense the way that you are, I mean, maybe they can play spoiler, but Joe, how? Like the only way would be is if Jalen Milroe reverts back to some of the things that he had been doing, starts turning the ball over, and they got short fields to work with. Joe, they can't run the football. They're 86, and they're going up against a rush defense who's starting to become really stout. I know that you're talking about Justice Haynes and Jam Miller and Jalen Milroe in that running game. Joe, they're still top 30 in run offense. So, right. Again, and here's what I think a lot of teams have done, even watching that Mercer game. Joe, you know what they said? We gonna take away one thing, and LSU tried to take away both things, and it backfired. But I've seen this story before. I literally saw it a year ago. I'm not going to walk away from it. Here's the thing, though, that I do want to see in this game if I'm Oklahoma. How much is your team bought in on your head coach? Because if you go out there and you play against a team that's ranked and who's been the pinnacle of the SEC, and you lay down and roll over so that Alabama can scratch your belly, I'm going to be worried about Venables at this point, right? I mean, I really, really, really am. So you could say, well, they had some success against Ole Miss. Well, they fired their coordinator in Ole Miss after they got a half to see what you were doing. They locked you down. Golly, Joe, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say it's a blowout. I'm not going to say that they're not going to score or anything like that. But, man, this has the markers and makings of something that I think Bama's going in one direction, and I think Oklahoma's going in a completely different one as the season goes on.
Well, and I think that's an understatement that there's been a pretty massive shift in the directions of these two teams where their defense plays well. Like, their defense has produced turnovers. And I mentioned how they're not allowing a lot of early success or just success in general against the run. Their defense has produced 32 sacks on the season. They're not allowing very many pass yards per game, only 7.3 yards per attempt, which is pretty good. Mason Thomas has been a productive sack getter with 7 on the season. There's a world where Oklahoma could play this game close. Kind of like the way that we saw against Tennessee. Well, like we saw against Tennessee. And I'm not saying that this is a likelihood. I'm saying that there's like a very minuscule chance. If there is a world that it happens, it's because they
called off the dogs, Joe.
Right. And that was a very mediocre second half for Tennessee. And we unpacked a lot with that game. The only way that you can is if your defense is able to create early turnovers if you're able to force Jalen Milroe into making mistakes. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think what you just said there, this does feel like it's shaping up to be a blowout. This does feel like it is shaping up in a position where Alabama is feeling themselves. They have all of the momentum. As long as they don't overlook an opponent and look past Auburn or look past to Auburn, they should be fine. There should be no reason to believe that Oklahoma is built to keep this game close.
So they're 117th in runoff and in total offense. They're 112th on third down.
Yeah.
They're 86th in run offense. They're 115th in passing offense. I mean, like there comes a part where Q, the Ole Miss game, you had a good half, a decent half. Joe, again, I need to see want and fighting, like some serious want to here, like legitimately. Because if I don't, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen
We're
with
going to have
Venables.
a serious conversation about Oklahoma in the offseason. Very, very serious.
I don't think that they can him because they just signed him to this extension, and I think that makes things super. I think a lot of people saw the Jimbo Fisher firing, and a lot of people are quick to assume that every single fan base, or not every single fan base, every single athletic department is going to do that, and every single booster organization is going to find the money to do that. Texas A&M is one of one. They are one of one for how willing they were to do that. We are in a very strange world where we're at the current moment, Blake, that buyouts are so big that I think a lot of programs are going to just suffer through bad years. I really do. I don't think that a lot of teams are going to be pushing to fire guys. It's the same reason why Mike Norvell is still coaching. It's the same reason why Billy Napier is still coaching, which has the smallest buyout of anyone who's brought up here. Lincoln Riley as well at USC. I think that Venables is going to get a couple of years of runway before they decide to find a way to get rid of him.
Very well could. Joe, let me take a very quick break. And then we'll come right back.
Okay.
BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag.
All right, so we should be getting to the Arizona State BYU preview. We're just waiting for Blake to get back. We do have one super chat here from Andrew. Who is going to replace Brian Kelly after the Vanderbilt L? I don't think that they're going to lose to Vanderbilt. And frankly, I think a lot of us were surprised by the way that they played against Florida. One of my biggest talking points coming into that game was that Brian Kelly's the king of stepping up and rebounding after a bad performance and playing his best game. I didn't think that they were going to collapse like that. The collapse that they had against Florida does make me think that they are in this position to potentially lose to Vanderbilt. Because Vanderbilt's played spoiler. They've played close with everybody that they've gone up against if they have not upset them. We saw the Texas game. If they're able to play Texas that close, and obviously we know what happened with Alabama, if they're able to play Texas that close, there is plenty of position here for Vanderbilt to keep this matchup close as well. But to talk on this, I know that there is a resounding buildup for some LSU fans that are saying that they're done and they're sick of Brian Kelly. He is another one who fits into that conversation that I just brought up there at the end of the Oklahoma segment, that it just doesn't make sense to try and get rid of him. His buyout's enormous. It's the problem with a lot of these programs bringing in these big name coaches that haven't coached or recruited in various conferences and jumping to the conclusion that one, they're going to be a good coach, and then assuming that there's this long-term future and this massive money attached to it, that they're going to be good enough that they're going to produce results to earn it, and that they're not going to have to fire them at some point. It's a big issue in the coaching market, and I don't know how it gets fixed. The NFL doesn't really deal with situations like this. The buyouts are nowhere near as large. And I think that the biggest result of that is the scarcity that's created because there's so many freaking teams. There's so many important Power 4 teams that think that they should be national championship worthy. So they're willing to shell out massive amounts of money in order to just have a chance at a guy who has done some good things. So I don't think that Brian Kelly gets moved on from. His recruiting has been good enough that there should be an outlook towards next season that they will bounce back and that they will be much better. Interesting tidbit here. It was reported on that I think that Bryce Underwood is supposed to enroll early, that he was supposed to enroll, I want to say it was December 9th, that he is like on track to enroll early. So in case, unless something crazy happens in between the next couple of weeks and when that early enrollment period is for him to start getting ready to become an LSU Tiger, there's no reason he's gone. LSU is not going to get rid of Brian Kelly in hopes of being able to keep Bryce Underwood. Sorry, I was just talking. I was answering a
Did you really just spend this time to talk about?
No. There was somebody asked about, I elaborated on this, and I was talking about how good friend of the show, Ryan Roberts, had reported on today that Bryce Underwood is set to enroll on December 9th, I believe. So it sounds like that there's no reason that he is going to, change his mind last second.
Seems like On3 was pushing something maybe they shouldn't have been pushing. What do I know? Maybe somebody had been saying that. All right, let's get to the final game here. Joe, a big one in the Big 12 here, BYU versus Arizona State. How you see this one playing out?
Look, I said this, and I'm going to keep pushing this freaking narrative. BYU is the most boringly average team that everybody wanted to hype up to be a super competitive, worthy of being a seeded bye team in the college football playoff. That is not the case. I dug into the stats. Sure, they've got a couple of quality wins. They're middling in most categories. Inversely, Blake, and why I'm picking Arizona State in this game, Arizona State runs the ball really damn hard. Sam Levitt's been a quality quarterback for them, but Cam Scadaboo has been so good for this Arizona State team. And I do not have faith after watching some of the results produced by Kansas in their run game with Jalen Daniels and with Devin Neal. I don't think that they're going to be able to slow down Scadaboo. The guy's got almost 1,500 total yards of offense on the year. He's got 11 rushing touchdowns. The dude is a bowling ball. It all comes down to what does Scadaboo do in this game?
The thing with BYU, man, is we saw last week if they're not able to produce the turnovers, which they're one of the best teams in the nation at getting teams to turn over the football, that they can be things can get really bad for them offensively. Now, their time of possession, that's what they want to do. They're top 12 in time of possession. But, Joe, they cannot stay on the field on third down offensively. So when they're not producing short fields for their offense offensively, they have issues. That is the story of BYU. They cannot move the ball efficiently if a team can go and score on them a little bit. And I think that might be Arizona State here. A lot is going to be played into this because, look, if Arizona State wins out here, we're going to look at Kenny Dillingham as a potential playoff team. Scadaboo is the reason that I look at this game, Joe, and I'm like, listen, man, I don't know. I don't like this matchup if I'm BYU. The only thing is, Joe, how does a BYU team that finally slipped up respond here? Like, we've seen them play bad the last couple of weeks, but, I mean, they've gone through the other parts of their Big 12 schedule, and they've been able to win. I just think that they're so bad on offense right now, Joe, in certain areas, especially on third down, that I look at BYU and it's like, listen, man, if you're going to struggle that much, teams like Arizona State is going to get you in third down, and I think that they have more athletes than you do, and it's going to show evidently in crucial parts and moments in this game.
You talked about the bounce back, and I think that's going to be like what needs to be tracked and paid attention to is like how does BYU respond to adversity? And it really sucks for them. Remove my angst against them aside for a second. It sucks for them that you're coming off of this loss and you have to go up against a team that's got one of the best rushing attacks just in general in the country. I know Scadaboo's been a little banged up. I don't know what his actual health situation is because we just don't get real clarity on, where guys are actually feeling at this point in the season. But I just can't get behind BYU's offense being able to play closely enough in this game with all the turnovers that they have. Like, we saw Retzlaff have just a brutal performance with the turnovers that he had in crucial situations. Arizona State's not the type of offense to give them the ball back with a short field, or to give them the ball back after they scored a touchdown and you're marching down the field and you throw an interception in the end zone. It is not the team to do that against. Their defense isn't half bad either, but they have allowed a couple of bad games that they've faced here. I just keep coming back to it. I don't know where I'm supposed to look at BYU and think this is where they win the football game.
I agree. I mean, listen, in closing out here, the only thing, Joe, is if they don't, they're a holding call away from having 2 losses. They really are. Okay. And so
there are a lot of things away from having more losses than they do at the current moment.
Yeah, I know. And look, I think Dillingham has gotten this team up to play. Look, man, with Scatterboo, you're never out of it on third down. Him catching the ball out of the backfield and running the football. They're top 30 in the country in run offense. And when you can dominate teams that way, man, I mean, you're going to be tough to beat. The only thing, though, is, Joe, Arizona State has been leaky defensively. And if this is a game that BYU's like, hey, I don't have to face the stress of, maybe this team, we can move the ball on this team some, and maybe it is Arizona State. I don't know. But I look at Scatterboo, I look at Dillingham and what they're doing. I think that, again, we talked about this a lot tonight. One team I feel like is going this way, and the other team's going this way. It's an uphill, downhill trajectory. I mean, this is back-to-back weeks for BYU here. So let's see how they respond. But, Joe, I got to be real with you. I got to take Arizona State here, and I think it's going to be Arizona State, and I think it's going to be Colorado for the Big 12 title game.
And I support that. And as I said yesterday, that gets us the most competitive and entertaining game. I want to see Arizona State versus Colorado. I do not want to see BYU, who has only 14 sacks on the year and can't produce pressures, go up against Colorado and get completely blown past. I'm rooting for Arizona State. I think that they're a far more interesting team. They have got better playmakers on offense and a couple of big playmakers on defense. I'm sticking with Arizona State. I'm sticking with Cam Scatterboo.
I'm right there with you, man. Right there with you. All right. We'll see y'all again tomorrow. Y'all have a good night. Peace out, Girl Scouts.